So, something happened recently that I never thought I'd have to deal with. The HOA told me to move my boat. The twist? I own the lake. Let me walk you through how that went for them. I bought this land 3 years ago. 30 acres of quiet woods, rocky paths, a small clearing perfect for a cabin. It also came with a lake, spring-fed mirror still, and legally part of my property line. Full ownership, water, banks and dock. No easements, no gray areas. The guy I bought it from was clear. The lake's yours. Always has been. Deeded straight back to the family who first settled here. I made damn sure that was in writing before I ever signed anything. First thing I did when I moved in, built myself a dock. Nothing fancy, just enough for 2 chairs, a cooler and a boat tied off on the south end. Weekends, I'd take it out early, throw a line in, drink my coffee on the water, let the rest of the world spin itself into stress. Then came the notice. White envelope, taped to my front door like a parking ticket. Boat must be removed from the lake immediately. HOA regulations prohibit unauthorized watercraft. Unauthorized? I stared at it for a second like maybe it would rewrite itself if I squinted hard enough. There was no signature, just a printed name. Karen Delaney, Simmons Ridge HOA president. I didn't know who Karen was. I didn't even know there was an HOA. As far as I knew, my property wasn't under any community covenant. But the name sounded exactly like the kind of person who'd have laminated binders for neighborhood rules, and matching sweaters for committee meetings. I crumpled the paper, threw it on the counter, and poured myself another cup of coffee. Next step? I pulled out the deed. The original. Not a copy. Not a screenshot. Real notarized. Legal proof that the lake, dock, and every inch of the water was mine. No mention of shared use. No carve-outs for community access. Just me and 30 acres wrapped around a body of water I paid for with real money. Still, I figured maybe this was a misunderstanding. I showed up to the next HOA meeting. I wasn't on the list. They didn't know who I was. Didn't matter. I walked in holding my deed like a Bible, and waited for Karen to open her mouth. She did, eventually. Sir, I'm not sure you're aware. I cut her off. I am, and I brought receipts. Laid the papers on the table in front of her. Clear as day, parcel numbers, boundaries, signatures, and one little sentence underlined in red. Lake, dock, and adjacent water line are the sole property of the landowner. The room went quiet. Karen flipped through the pages, frowning like the text might rearrange itself into something that gave her authority. It didn't. Well, she sniffed. We were under the impression the lake was community shared. It's not, I said. I see. You'd think that would be the end of it. But HOAs don't like being told they're wrong, especially not by someone who isn't in their little club. Next morning, I saw movement down by the water. Walked out, boots crunching through the frost, and there they were. 3 guys in fishing vests setting up on my dock like it was their weekend retreat. I didn't yell, didn't threaten, just stood there and said, "Y'all need to pack up." One of them turned around, confused. "We're with the HOA fishing club." Karen said this is open to members. It's not. It's mine. Got the deed to prove it. They stared at me like I just told them Santa wasn't real. But to their credit, they packed up, quietly, respectfully. I thought maybe that was the end. Then came the second notice. Typed, signed, stamped with an HOA logo. Cease and desist from interfering with HOA-sanctioned activities. Failure to comply will result in legal action. Legal action. I read it twice. Then I called my lawyer. My lawyer didn't even flinch when I handed him the letter. He scanned it once, let out a short laugh, and said, "This HOA's about to step in something they can't wipe off." His name's Mark. Good guy. Old school. Sharp, zero patience for people who confuse noise with authority. He read through the cease and desist like it was written in crayon. Said the wording was vague, the citations were fake, and the tone, straight up intimidation. "They don't have jurisdiction," he said. "You're not part of their HOA. You've got the deed, and the lake is fully enclosed within your property. They're bluffing." Mark drafted a response the same day. Short, clear, and brutal. To the Simmons Ridge HOA, your cease and desist holds no legal ground. My client is the sole owner of the lake, dock, and surrounding land. Continued harassment or unauthorized use will be treated as trespassing. Legal action will follow. Sincerely, Mark Fenton, attorney at law. We sent copies to Karen, the HOA board, and the county records office for good measure. Then we posted signs, big ones, bright yellow, bold black letters, private property, no trespassing. Lake owned by parcel 381B. Trespassers will be prosecuted. I put one at every entry point to the trail that led to the water. Even nailed one to the dock for good measure. You'd think that would have been the end of it. But no. Karen didn't back off. She doubled down. 2 days later, I caught her personally walking the lake perimeter with a tape measure and a clipboard, muttering to herself. I watched her from my porch, cup of coffee in hand, steam rising in the cold morning air. She had the look of someone trying to turn stubborn into power. I walked down the hill, calm, hands in my coat pockets. Morning, I said. She didn't answer, just kept walking, measuring, scribbling. You're trespassing, I added. I'm surveying, she replied. For what? Boundary adjustments. I almost laughed. Karen, this lake's been here longer than your HOA. You don't get to redraw lines with a clipboard and good intentions. She looked up, smug. We have reason to believe the lake spills slightly into community land. That makes it shared under our agreement. There's no agreement, I said. And even if the water moved, that's natural erosion, not a property sale. Karen didn't like that. Her mouth flattened into a thin line. She said something about bringing in a certified compliance officer and stormed off back to her pastel SUV. I figured we were done for the day. But later that week, I found something else. A group of teenagers, fishing rods, coolers, branded HOA vests, setting up at the edge of the lake again. This time, not just on my dock. They were planting a small sign that read, Simmons Ridge Community Fishing Club, members only. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I called the sheriff. Deputy rolled in half an hour later. Friendly guy. I handed him the deed, the signs, the lawyer's letter. He read everything, asked a few questions, then walked down to the kids and politely told them to leave. They left. No complaints. He turned to me on the way out and said, they keep this up, they're gonna get someone arrested. I nodded. They're not listening. They're pretending if they repeat it enough, they're right. He shook his head. Seen it before. HOA types that forget where the line stops. Next day, I filed a no trespass order for the dock and the shoreline. Took the paperwork to the courthouse myself. Clerk stamped it with a dull thunk that felt like a gavel. 3 days after that, a letter from Karen showed up in my mailbox. No envelope this time, just folded and taped shut. She didn't even bother to pretend it was formal. Inside a handwritten note. You are making this harder than it needs to be. The lake is part of our community history. If you won't share it, we'll escalate. Escalate. She used that word like it meant something. I showed it to Mark. He raised an eyebrow, tucked it into a file folder, and said, that's a threat. Let's treat it like one. We drafted another letter. Legalese turned up to 10. This time, we warned that continued harassment would lead to restraining orders, damages for nuisance, and a civil lawsuit for trespass and property interference. Mark called it putting teeth on the warning. Still, Karen pushed forward. Flyers started appearing in mailboxes across the neighborhood. Not from me, hers. Big letters, bold print, dramatic wording. Community under siege. Local property owner blocks lake access. She called me a danger to unity. Said I was hoarding a natural resource. Claimed I was aggressively obstructing residents from enjoying the water. Only problem, I had it all on record. Video, photos, timestamps, sheriff reports. She had noise. I had evidence. The next time I saw someone setting foot near my dock, it wasn't a kid with a rod. It was a man in khakis, wearing a badge that said HOA Enforcement Liaison. And that's when things really started to spin out. He stepped onto my property like he'd done it 100 times before. Tall guy, maybe mid-40s, clean shaven, square jaw, buzz cut like he was fresh out of ROTC. Khakis pressed so stiff they probably crackled when he walked. Navy polo tucked in tight with a patch on the sleeve that read Simmons Ridge HOA Enforcement Liaison, as if a fake badge made him the law. He had a clipboard in one hand and what looked like a laminated binder in the other. From my porch I watched him walk straight down to the lake like he owned the shoreline. Didn't even glance at the private property signs. Just stepped right past them, boots sinking slightly in the damp dirt near the dock. I didn't yell, Didn't rush. I set my coffee down, walked down nice and easy. When I reached him, he was halfway through taking photos. My dock, my boat, even my no trespassing signs. Like he was building a case for something no one asked him to investigate. Morning, I said. He didn't look up. You the landowner? I am. He nodded, still clicking pictures. Just conducting a compliance review. Nothing to worry about. I raised an eyebrow. Compliance for what, exactly? He finally turned. The HOA has received multiple complaints regarding unauthorized use of shared aquatic space. I'm here to document violations and advise next steps. Let me stop you right there, I said. There's no shared aquatic space. This lake sits entirely on my deeded land. He smirked like I just didn't get it. The community considers this part of the common environment. You've restricted access without following proper engagement procedures. I held out my hand. Let me see the authority you're claiming. He hesitated, then handed me the binder. I flipped it open. Glossy pages, generic rules, nothing legally binding, no signatures, no county references. One of the pages actually said, guidelines adapted from neighborhood standards and suggestions. That was it. Nothing enforceable, nothing real. This isn't a legal document, I said. It's a PowerPoint presentation someone printed on cardstock. He straightened his back, clearly trying to recover some posture. Refusal to comply may result in board action. What board? The HOA. I cut him off, which has no jurisdiction here. I'm not part of Simmons Ridge, never have been. This land was excluded when the charter was filed. He blinked, thrown for a second. I'll need to verify that. No you don't, I said, stepping a little closer. Because the county already did. Twice. You're on private property. You're not law enforcement. You're not a government agency. You're a man with a clipboard trespassing on someone else's land. He didn't answer. He turned, started to walk back up the hill toward the road. I followed him part way, just enough to make sure he saw me watching. That night, another letter appeared. This one was slipped under my door. Typed, neat, with the HOA logo stamped at the top. To the resident of Parcel 381B, due to your continued non-cooperation and hostility toward HOA outreach efforts, you are hereby notified that Simmons Ridge reserves the right to seek legal recourse to reclaim shared resources and restore community order. Sincerely, the board. I didn't laugh this time. I scanned it twice, handed it to Mark the next morning, and watched him go from amused to focused. They're dancing on a landmine, he muttered. They're threatening legal action based on made-up laws. This is escalating into full-blown civil interference. Let's return the favor, I said. We filed an official cease and desist. Not just a warning. A legally notarized document outlining every trespass, every false claim, every incident I'd recorded since the first notice landed on my door. We included photos, timestamps, audio from Karen's threats, and the video of the so-called liaison snapping pictures like a scout before battle. Mark sent copies to the HOA, the county zoning board, the sheriff's department, and the local newspaper editor. He wanted a paper trail, as long as the dock. The following week was quiet, too quiet, until I got the letter from the county clerk. Turns out, Karen had filed an injunction. She was attempting to designate the lake as a shared environmental resource on behalf of Simmons Ridge, claimed it was historically used by the community for recreation and enrichment. My hands tightened as I read it. This wasn't just noise anymore. She was going for the throat. I called Mark. He was already ahead of it. She submitted it under false pretenses, he said. The records don't support it. We'll challenge it. And we did. I submitted my full deed history, satellite imagery from before I bought the land, photos from the county archives showing the lake clearly enclosed by fences even before Simmons Ridge was built. We even found an old developer's blueprint labeling the lake as excluded parcel, private ownership. The clerk reviewed everything, then dismissed the injunction in less than 3 days. But that wasn't the win. The win came when I filed for a formal protective easement. A legal designation that would permanently lock the lake, shoreline, and access routes as private, untouchable, and 100% off limits to the HOA, now and forever. Karen didn't see it coming, but the best part, that was still to come, because they still had one thing they loved more than power, their fishing club, and I had the paperwork in hand that would shut it down for good. Saturday morning came with the sound of laughter. I heard it before I saw them. 4, maybe 5 of them, down by the dock. Folding chairs, tackle boxes, coolers already cracked open. It looked like a postcard, except for the fact they were trespassing. Again. And the worst part, one of them was wearing a Simmons Ridge Fishing Club shirt, bright green with a hook, and the HOA's logo printed above it like it was something to be proud of. I stood there for a second, coffee steaming in my hand, wondering if I'd let this go on too long. Then I saw Karen, not fishing of course. She stood off to the side, clipboard in hand, sunglasses on, pretending to check water quality or shoreline preservation compliance. She wasn't even looking at the lake. She was watching me, like she'd been waiting, like this was the final push she needed to get her case rolling. She didn't wave, just turned, muttered something to a guy next to her, and walked back toward the SUV. Her guy stayed behind, holding a manila envelope. I watched him walk up my dock, stop halfway, and stick the envelope between 2 planks under a paperweight. Then they all left, one by one, like it was just another Saturday on the water. I didn't open the envelope right away. I finished my coffee first. Then I walked down, kicked the rock off the papers, and slid them out. It was an invitation to a formal hearing hosted by the HOA to determine my status as a disruptive presence to the greater Simmons Ridge recreational environment. They wanted to vote me out of a neighborhood I never joined. They were calling it a public nuisance review. I laughed so hard, I nearly dropped the whole thing in the lake. I called Mark, told him I needed a copy of the protective easement laminated and ready. Told him I needed the county registrar to confirm again that the HOA's fishing club had zero legal claim to access, dock use, or water rights. He said, "On it." But I wasn't just waiting this time. I was going to end it. That night, I installed a gate, right at the entrance to the dirt path that leads to the dock. Thick steel frame, hinges that laugh at bolt cutters, chain lock backed by a keypad code. Next morning, I posted a sign, "Access to this dock and lake is by permission only. Violators will be prosecuted for trespassing under county law. This is not community property. You have been warned." They came back 2 days later, fishing gear in hand. They stopped at the gate like someone had flipped the world upside down. Karen wasn't with them this time, but clipboard guy was. He pulled out his phone, took pictures of the lock, the sign, the gate, the surrounding fence. Then he left without saying a word. 2 days after that, Mark called. "You've got a new letter coming your way." Another threat. "No," he said. A retreat. Turns out, the county had finally had enough. After Karen's last failed injunction, her filing privileges were suspended pending investigation. Her lawyer withdrew 2 days later. No official statement, just vanished. Probably tired of trying to argue fantasy in front of real judges. And the fishing club disbanded. The HOA quietly removed every reference to it from their newsletters, website, and event calendars. They even sent an email to residents saying the lake would no longer be included in community outreach or gatherings, due to ongoing boundary disputes. I printed that one out, framed it, hung it above the coffee pot. But Karen still wasn't done. One last shot. She showed up at my gate, alone. No clipboard this time. Just a pair of sunglasses and an expression that said she wasn't here to make peace. "You win," she said flatly. "I always did," I replied. "You could have shared it. You didn't have to be so." She paused, searching for the word. "Aggressive." I nodded. "You're right. I didn't have to be. I chose to be." She didn't say anything else, just turned around and walked back down the trail. A week later, her house went up for sale. No fanfare, no goodbye, just a moving truck and a quiet disappearance. The neighborhood's different now, quieter. Some folks still wave, some still pretend not to see me. But the dock's mine, the lake's mine, the peace is real again. And every once in a while, I sit out there with a rod in one hand, coffee in the other, and think about how close they came to taking it all, just because they thought a badge and a rulebook made them kings. Turns out, they were fishing in the wrong waters, because when you own the lake, you don't move your boat, you move them, and you don't ask twice.